I literally had a student in middle school that asked me if boys can have babies. And then when I explained to him no, he wanted to know why.
Welcome to the Blind Mom Life podcast. I'm your host, Chelsey Painter Davis, blind wife, mother, and pro-life Christian speaker. I want to invite you to dive deep with my special guests and I as we talk conquering disabilities, cherishing motherhood, and choosing life. Are you ready? Action. Oh, wow. I have a confession to make. I love the movie Mean Girls. Oh, I know I'm not supposed to. It's so inappropriate. It's so cringe. It's so bad. Oh my goodness. But it's so relatable. It feels so true when you watch it. All of the social pressures of high school, the sexual pressures, the substance abuse pressures, the pressure from teachers, the pressure from parents, everywhere. Pressure all the time. What do I do? Who am I going to be? It's just so much. It's so hard. And Mean Girls really demonstrates this in a very relatable way that I feel like every girl watches it and says, yeah, that's what my high school felt like. Oh my goodness. It's so hard out there. There's so many voices speaking into our kids all of the time saying, this is the way you should behave. This is the way you should act. This is what you should do with your body. This is what you shouldn't do with your body. So many voices. Ours as parents, as mothers, it gets drowned out. And how do we know that we're using the right voice? What are we saying? Do we have any credibility when we talk to our children about the do's and don'ts of their bodies and their relationships? Oh my goodness, it's so hard. And I really love the way that Mean Girls demonstrates the story by using the character Katie. She is starting public high school for the first time in her life after being homeschooled abroad. She doesn't know what to do, just like every girl entering high school doesn't know what to do. There's the jocks and the nerds and the pretty girls and then the cool kids and then the sports people and then the teachers and oh my goodness, it's so hard. You're just left asking, who am I? Who am I going to be? What am I going to do? And what does that even mean? And we really have to be there for our children in these moments, even if they don't want us to be there for them. Because if we're not there holding their hand, speaking the truth into them, understanding that it's so hard, there's so much pressure, who's going to do it? Who's going to tell them the truth about their bodies, about their purpose, about their relationships, who they're called to be? So I'm so excited today to have on Aimee Almon, the Sexual Health and Relationships Education Director at my local Pregnancy Resource Center. Oh my goodness, she has so much wisdom. She's been talking to teens about sex for years. Oh my goodness. And she has picked up some tips and some skills and some wisdom about what actually works. What do these kids actually want to know? What is real to them? What are the problems they're actually facing? And what can we do as their parents to make sure that we help? All right, Aimee, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Why don't you share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, thank you for having me, Chelsey. So my name is Aimee Almon, and I'm a mom of two sons. I have a 33-year-old and a 28-year-old son, and I have a granddaughter named Sophia. I'm married. I work at a Woman's Choice Pregnancy Care Center in Lakeland, Florida. I'm the S.H.A.R.E director there. So that stands for Sexual Health and Relationship Education. And I've been there for 16 years.
So what is a S.H.A.R.E director? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so we're the preventative arm of a Woman's Choice. So we go into the schools, we go into churches, we go into adjudicated youth programs, and we're sharing a message of sexual health to middle school and high school students. Um, just letting them know that it's okay to be in a relationship and not be sexually active until you're married. The pinnacle that we're trying to get them to see is that sex inside of a married relationship is the best sex of all. And so we go in for 6 weeks into a class, and we do a different lesson each week. And it's just focused on refraining from having sex, using alcohol, using tobacco products, drugs. We talk about bullying. We talk about a lot of different topics.
Wow. So sex is like a big scary topic for most parents. What did you do with your sons, and then how is that different in the S.H.A.R.E program, or how is it the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I started talking to my sons very early about sex. They were in middle school, and, we just started talking very openly, honestly. I never assumed that they knew things. I just kind of left it open ended where they could ask me questions. Um, and I was I was very honest with them when they would ask me a question. I would tell them the truth. And the climate has changed a lot. Some of the issues that I'm dealing with now are much different than when my children were younger. But it's still the same. Students are just they want something that's real. They want you to be truthful with them. They want you to accept them and love on them, and so that's what I do. I mean, we go in and we talk about these issues, but it's not in a lecture type style. We do a lot of interactive games. We do a lot of huddles where we just kind of get into groups and talk. Um, they ask me a lot of questions, and I'm honest with them, just like I was with my children. And we just share. We talk about relationships and what that looks like, what a good relationship versus a bad relationship looks like. And it's just it's a fabulous curriculum that we use. It's called Real Essentials, out of Colorado, and so we're trained in the Real Essentials curriculum, and then we also go through an SRAS certification, and that's out of Washington D.C. So we're very trained on this topic as presenters, and then we can go in and just make it our own, so to speak, and just share the curriculum with them on a weekly basis for 6 weeks.
Can you paint us a picture of like what that looks like in the classroom or in, I guess, youth groups when you're saying churches? You said it's a 6 week program. How do you go in and break the ice with these kids who are, like still trying to hide like tampons in their purse and don't want to talk to anybody about this? Like, how does that work, Aimee?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So we start out with a video. We show them a short video. It's about 5 minutes long, and it's students in the video, real students that are whatever that particular topic is for the day. If it's teen pregnancy, then we have a couple of different couples who are teens and who have found themselves in a quote unquote crisis pregnancy because they're teenagers, and they tell their story. And then afterwards, the students have a lesson that we pass out to them before the class starts, and they have questions that they're answering based on the video that they just watched. And we just talk about it in class. They're not just writing the answers down at their desk, but I'm calling
Mhm.
on them. We bring in candy, we bring in Smarties, and we kind of throw Smarties, as they're answering questions. So it keeps them engaged because kids love candy. And then after that, then we do an interactive lesson, which would be just really kind of acting out. Like if it's, for instance, the teen pregnancy lesson, we actually have them act out what it would be like to go through your day. We start at 6 a.m. and then we go all the way until 11 o'clock that night. And we talk about all day long what you would be responsible for as a teen parent. So that would look like getting up, getting a shower, getting the baby up, getting the baby dressed and fed, and you as well, getting them to daycare, and then getting yourself to school by 7 or 7:30, going to class all day while your child is in daycare, going and picking them up, going to your little part-time job if you have one, coming home,
Mhm.
having to feed the baby dinner and give the baby a bath and try to do your homework, and getting the baby to bed, and then trying to get yourself in bed, and then starting all over again the next day. And it's really hard. And that's why we know that the research shows that a lot of those students don't graduate. They drop out, or they try to get their GED, because it's not easy to be a teen parent. And we know
Mhm.
that. So we want them to experience what that looks like, in a classroom setting, so they can really think about it. And then by thinking about it and acting those things out, they're able to make better choices because they've experienced it, so to speak.
Mhm. So when you're structuring this like 6-week program with these students, do you go in and assess like, is this mostly girls class? Is this co-ed? Is this middle schoolers, teenagers? Does it adjust based on who you're speaking to?
Yes, it absolutely does. So I talk to the teachers prior to going into a classroom setting. I find out what the demographic is. I find out how many students they have. Sometimes we do break it down, guys for 6 weeks and then girls for 6 weeks. Sometimes we do it together. The teacher lets me know what they feel like would be best based on their students. And then we go into a related field, such as science or health, or in the Christian schools, a Bible class, or maybe a PE class. So we tie it
Mhm.
into the Florida Sunshine Standards, which is part of the teacher's curriculum in our state. And there's a whole segment under the Florida Sunshine Standards that's called sexual health. So that's our in, so to speak. And so a lot of times we do have it split up, because it's hard, when you're a middle school student,
Mhm.
and as you said, you're this stuff is not easy things to talk about. So we go in and we just try to establish rapport with them. We try to talk to them about their families, get to know them a little bit. And in 6 weeks time, you have a lot of time to really get to know these students, because you're spending a lot of time with them. So
Mhm.
it's not just going in there and just telling them something and then saying, okay, goodbye, have a nice life, don't have sex. We're really investing in their lives. And that's
Mhm.
the key to it, is really getting to know them, and then sharing these topics with them, and not in again, not in a lecturing style, but really just as a friend, a mentor, someone who really cares about them, um, letting them know that it's okay to ask tough questions. And a lot of times I'll have students that will say, well, I don't want to talk about this in class, but could I call you, or, could I contact you? And so I always give them my email address at the center where I work, a Woman's Choice. I've had students that have
Mhm.
come into the center and done a one-on-one counseling session with me after they had me in class. So that's kind of our approach.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but a lot of people kind of contest this form of sexual health education in schools or churches because they'll just chalk it up to like, you can't tell teenagers not to have sex. They're going to have sex. So why even waste your breath? It's ridiculous waste of time. And what do you say to that? And like, what do you think are the main key points that you should actually be teaching the kids in this 6-week course of really educational discussion?
Yes. So first of all, to answer the first part of your question,
Hmm.
I say that they really do want to have a good life, a good marriage. Many of them, they're not having that modeled in front of them. They share with me that their parents are either divorced, or they hate each other, and just kind of cohabitate with each other. And
Hmm.
a lot of their parents are very involved in their own social media life and don't have a lot of time for them, so they will share these things in class with me, and it bothers them. And they want more, they want better, they just don't really know what that looks like. And so I just, again, I share with them that sex is not just physical. Everybody that's having sex is not getting pregnant or getting a sexually transmitted disease, although a lot are. One in four sexually active teens right now already has a sexually transmitted disease. So the numbers are very high. But it's not just physical, it's intellectual, it's emotional, it's social, it's spiritual. We bring in a pies chart, and that's the pieces of your sexuality is physical, intellectual, emotional, social, and spiritual. So we really
Hmm.
flesh out what each one of them looks like, and we want to educate them on the whole person, not just the physical part of sex. What it does to you emotionally when you go from relationship to relationship and you're just having sex with everybody that you uh, go out with. What does that do to you? Because you're giving a piece of yourself away to each one of those people that you're with. And then fast forward 10 years, you get married, and you're going to repeat the same behavior in your marriage. And that's why the divorce rate in the United States of America is so high, because we give up on our marriages because that's what we've done. That's our pattern that we've started in high
Hmm.
school, college. And so, we just give up when the going gets tough. And we want them to see that it doesn't have to be that way. There's a different way. And one of the best ways to ensure that you can really get to know somebody and have a healthy relationship is not to just engage in sexual activity. Get to really know them. I bring in a cake, and we call it the foundations of a good relationship. And
Hmm.
we start out by you get to know them, you talk, you find out what they like, what they don't like. You date, you meet their family, their parents, their siblings. You see how they talk to their parents, to their siblings. All of these pieces are building a foundation to where then when you get married, the icing on the cake is literally sex, because that's an amazing thing in a marriage relationship where you're committed to another person, but it doesn't really fit when you're a teenager
Hmm.
or a college student. It really doesn't fit at all.
So, defenders of casual sex, I've heard them argue that there are lots of human interactions, social interactions that we have with other people, and we're just sharing experiences. Why does sex have to be any different? Why do you think it's different than just like going to the movies or hanging out and playing video games? Why is sex so different?
Yeah, that I think the biggest thing is probably the oxytocin hormone that is released when you're sexually active with somebody. It's a strong hormone. We do a whole lesson on oxytocin for them to really understand what that does. It literally bonds you for the rest of your life to another human being. So even though you might say that it's just a casual sexual act, it's really not, because through that hormone being released from your brain, you're bonded to this person for life. And that's why when you are in a quote unquote casual sexual relationship and you break up and you see that person around town or at school or whatever, it's very uncomfortable. You're not just running up to them and going, hey, how you doing, what's going on. You want to get away from them because you have bonded with them on a level that is just super strong. And that oxytocin chemical is the same that is emitted from a mother to her newborn baby. It's just this very strong chemical that we were created to have in our brains. And so it's a big deal when that's being exchanged with another person.
Hmm.
So it's not just casual. It's a lot more than that, and we really talk about what that looks like. Like I said, we spend a whole week on the oxytocin hormone because we believe, um, just so importantly, how we need to explain that to the students and make them understand how that works.
Hmm. What would you say is the most important, I guess, the key points when you're coming in and having this sex conversation, not just in the S.H.A.R.E program, but maybe just between a mom and her sixth grader or a dad and his high school son? What points really need to be hit in those conversations?
Yeah. That sex is something that's very special between two people. Um, that the best sex is within a healthy marriage commitment. Um, I talk to a mom and say, be honest with your child when they're asking you questions. Um, I had to be honest with my kids and tell them some things about my past that I was not proud of, but I wanted to tell them that because I wanted them to understand where I was coming from as their mom, as far as why it was so important to me that they wait.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I had seen what it had done to me, because of not waiting, because I didn't know all of this information that I know now. If I would have
Oh
known,
yeah.
if I would have had somebody that who would have really, because we had health class in school, but it was more just the physical aspect. The
Mm-hmm.
share program is the relational aspect, and that's a whole different side of it. And no one had ever really shared that piece of it with me. So I just really, come at it from the standpoint of, be honest with your child, share with them what you did, share with them that you want better for them, and explain to them why. And let them ask you a lot of questions. And, don't be afraid of the topic, because it's a real thing. And if you don't want to answer their questions, mom and dad, they're going to get it from social media, they're going to get it from their friends. They're going to try it themselves. They're going to find out one way or another. But the best place for them to find out is honestly from their parent, the person who
Mm-hmm.
loves them the most.
When do you think that we should start talking to our children about sex? I know that I first heard about sex when I was about 9-ish years old, but it probably came a little bit earlier than my mom wanted because I'd stumbled onto some material and in television that I was confused about and I had questions. But is that like a good age to first bring up the topic, or with social media and internet access now, do we have to like tiptoe into it a little bit sooner now?
Yeah, I honestly think we need to tiptoe into it a little bit sooner than that because of
Mhm.
social media. They're seeing, even in cartoons, there's these little hidden messages, and that is very, on purpose, and
Mhm.
so I think we have to counteract that by, not being inappropriate, obviously, just everything age appropriate, but just start talking to them about, their bodies, about the changes, the differences between boys and girls, at least by 9 or 10. And then really, in middle school, I have students in my classes that are in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade who are already having sex.
Oh, wow.
And, you're talking about 11 and 12-year-old students,
Mhm.
and they're already sexually active. They may not be going all the way and having sexual intercourse, but they're dabbling, they're playing, and it's just a matter of time. They're not going to go
Mhm.
backwards. They're always going to move forwards in what they're doing. So, I feel like you need to be very candid about that. As early as you feel, your child is ready, emotionally and,
Mhm.
um, you know, intellectually ready. If they're mature, then they're ready to talk about the topic. And they will start asking questions because it's all around them. They're
Mhm.
immersed in the culture, they're immersed in social media. And so, they are going to start asking questions a lot earlier than kids did before social media.
Yeah. So, how do you respect the boundaries and the privacy of this conversation? You, as a teacher, talking to other people's students and other people's children, but even just ourselves as we talk to our kids, because it is like, it's such an important topic. We want to be honest and open with our kids. But the last thing we want to do is like scare our children or tiptoe into something that is like really just an inappropriate level for them. How do we respect I guess, the privacy of those sexual boundaries?
Yeah. Again, don't assume that they know anything, more than they know, and the only way to really do that is to ask them some questions. You can start out by just talking about, hey, you know, have you noticed anybody at school that you think is cute, that
Mhm.
you've been talking to, or they've been talking to you? And, they'll just start talking. If you ask them, they're usually going to kind of just open up and go, oh yeah, mom, I did notice so and so. He's kind of cute, and we talk at lunch, and it just kind of opens up that dialogue. You're not going to just
Mm-hmm.
dive into this topic and just start talking to them, because then they're going to be like, "This is really uncomfortable, mom, and I don't want to talk to you about this." But
Mm-hmm.
you just really kind of go about it in a way of just regular conversation with your child. And then it can just move from there into, um, well, let's talk about, when you start dating,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I had I guess this was our rule, my husband and I, but we had the rule of they could date when they were 16.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, if they were old enough to drive, they were old enough to go on a single date. But prior to that, we just would let them do things with youth group and their friends. But there had to be a parent or a chaperone involved. We weren't going to let them just go in a on a single date, with a person that they liked. So I think you do
Right.
have to establish those boundaries early on and let your kids know what they are, and then be firm. You need to stand by what the boundaries are that you've put into place. um, Check their phones, make sure that you know who they're talking to, what they're looking at. I mean, parents are paying for their kids phones, so I think you should have complete access to that.
Mm-hmm.
And look at the cloud, see if they've got anything inappropriate, pictures or conversations. I mean, as a parent, that's our job. Our job is to really just take care of our children in every aspect, and this is probably the most important one. As they're teenagers and becoming young adults, this is the thing that we really need to focus on, because as I said, it's all around them. They're immersed in
Mm-hmm.
this. And social media is after one thing, and that is money. They don't care if these kids get pregnant. They don't care if they get a sexually transmitted disease. They don't care if they get their hearts broken. Their motivation is money. And so what
Mm-hmm.
I tell parents that come in and talk to me is, you know what is your motivation to talk to your child about sex? Well, I love them. Well, then you need to tell them that that's the reason we're talking about this, because I love you, not because I'm trying to get in your business, not because
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to be a busybody and bother you, but I love you as your parent, and I don't want you to make a mistake.
Mhm. I love that you brought up the phones and the social media because I feel like before, like when I was younger, if someone made a mistake with their sexuality, like they moved a little too fast with their boyfriend or something, it couldn't be filmed and put on the internet in the same way that it can now. So it's like almost the impact of these mistakes is really limitless at this point. So it's a lot scarier because there isn't that like safety net of just inaccessibility that can keep your kid more on the safe side. It really can. Just a video of your child doing something that later they regret can go viral. And that's so scary. And even predators can reach out to them that way and facilitate that those mistakes.
For sure. And we even do a lesson on that, because you're absolutely right, Chelsea. I don't even know if you
Mhm.
know, honestly, how far this can go. But if you are in a relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and you're 16 years
Mhm.
old, 17 years old, they may be pressuring you to, I've had students in my classes. I'll give you a for instance. I was in one
Mhm.
of my classes at McKeel Academy 2 years ago, and I had a student who was going out with a girl. He was 17, she was 16. They'd been dating for a while. It was a Friday night. Um, he was bored, and so he basically, after texting for a while, with his girlfriend, he's like, well,
Mhm.
send me a couple of pics. I mean, I'm bored, and I'm not going to do anything with him. I just want to see you. And and she didn't want to. She was resistant. Well, then she finally, after they had been texting back and forth, because you're much more prone to, you're going to push the envelope as far as what you're saying sexually behind that phone when you're texting versus face to face,
Mhm.
and that's a fact.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what happened. And so she ended up just kind of caving into the peer pressure of him asking her, and she sent some pics. Well, what happened was, his mother, not knowing really that he was in a relationship with this girl, his mother was on the cloud, and of course he was on her phone plan, and she found some pictures of a girl, and she was
Mm-hmm.
uh, half nude, from the waist up, and so she contacted the sheriff's department in Bartow,
Oh.
and literally they started an investigation. They have a whole sexual crimes unit there, um,
Mm-hmm.
where they have detectives that are in charge of that. And so they had to literally pull the pictures off the cloud, every single text that the two of them had engaged in,
Oh
in
no.
their relationship. They put a whole case together, and he was prosecuted because if you are a minor, which is 18 years or younger, that is considered child pornography. Even if it's between a
Right.
16 and 17-year-old boyfriend and girlfriend, it's still, the laws are stated that that is considered child pornography. So it ruined this kid's life. He ended up going
Yeah.
into the juvenile detention center. He had to serve time that was put on his record. He's never now going to be able to get into the military or into a good college. I mean, you go on the sexual predators list, which I think the laws will probably change because there is so much of that going on with
Mm-hmm.
teenagers, but the laws have not changed yet. So,
Right.
this is very serious things that we're talking about, and there's a lot of repercussions, even legally, that students aren't
Mm-hmm.
aware of.
And that is so sad because I feel like, although like that is not the best choice that you can make as a teenager with your boyfriend, girlfriend, like, hey, show me your boobs, isn't like an insane thing for teenagers to be saying to each other, as, like when they're in person. But you're right, as soon as you put it on the internet and as soon as other people are getting involved in that way, it turns into a crime, and that's not at all like what they meant to do, but it took
Yeah.
this unfortunately relatively normal mistake, and yeah, it completely changed their lives. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because they don't know the laws. I mean, we literally do a whole lesson on just that, sexting and social
Mhm.
media. We show a video of students getting caught. And, of course, every student is not going to be caught. I mean, we know that. But if you are, that's literally going to change the course of your life.
Mhm.
And so one just split second mistake, can literally change your life. And so we want to educate them. That's our job as the S.H.A.R.E program. We are not coming in to beat them over the head and say, hey, you bad kids, don't have sex. We're really there to educate them on the dangers of sexual activity, when you're a teenager or when you're a college student, because it's not just physical. There's so much more to it than that. And that way they can make better decisions. When we come in and educate them in the way that we do, they're going to make better decisions because they're going to think about that. And it's not
Yeah.
in the heat of the moment when they're, in bed with their boyfriend and girlfriend, or are they going to think about it? They're going to think about it on the front end so that they're going to make better choices going into the relationship.
Mhm. And I think when you add the relational component that you've been talking about, really explaining like why this is a problem, why this is dangerous, why this is risky, it might give them the mindset to be like, okay, well maybe it's perfectly reasonable for my 16-year-old girlfriend not to want to show me her boobs. Like
Hmm.
that is, and that is not just a reasonable position, that's the best position for both of us. Like regardless of whether or not we're involving phones or media or law enforcement. So I love that you are having a complete conversation with them so they can really like at least have the tools in their belt to really decide like, is this what I want to do, instead of just thinking none of it matters, which is so much what the social media says. I think even the media says about sex right now.
Absolutely. And we do a whole, and this is another piece of our curriculum. We do a whole component on starting over again. When you're talking to high school students specifically, many of them have been sexually active, made mistakes, not so much in the middle school, although we're seeing more of a crossover now than we ever have. But for high school students and certainly for college students, this idea of starting over is something that's very foreign to them. No one's ever talked to them or challenged them to start over in their sexuality. And so we go in and with a very comprehensive but a loving approach, to talk about what that looks like and really fleshing that out. You can start over and you can do things differently, and it's okay. And it's so much better because you've seen it really on both sides of the coin. You've seen the way you felt when you were sexually active and broke up with somebody versus actually going into a relationship and really getting to know them and really spending time with them and building a firm foundation
Hmm.
and having so much of a closer relationship because it's not just based on sex. And so, we talk a lot about starting over. I've had many students who have actually done just that. We do a lesson basically where we ask them to go for 90 days. If they've been sexually active in their relationship, we ask them to take a break for 90 days, which sounds like a long time, 3 months,
Hmm.
but it's really not, because time goes by so fast. So then in that 90 days, we give them all of these different activities to do with each other that are not concerning sex. They're just really kind of going back to the foundation of their relationship and getting to know each other and your likes and dislikes and your love language. And we tie the 5 love languages into that. And I've
Hmm.
had students who have said at the end of that 90 days where they were not sexually active with each other, and they'll come back to class and say to me, you know what, Miss Aimee, I did the 90-day challenge and I found out that we really have nothing in common at all. The only thing that we
Oh,
really had
wow.
in common was we had good sex. And that even kind of became old and redundant. And they don't use the word redundant, but that kind of just became old hat, after a while. But we really have nothing in common. And I didn't even realize that. And so
Hmm.
we ended up breaking up, because there wasn't really anything that we really liked about each other. And, they're not going to
Wow.
find that out if they're not doing some of these lessons and really kind of fleshing it out. As I said earlier, they don't really find all of these little nuggets of truth out. And so again,
Hmm.
that's what our job is to really make them think about these things on the front end and to help them to make better choices.
Yeah, because I mean that is true. Like moving forward into adult relationships, especially once you start having kids, like there's a lot of hours in the day when you are not having sex.
Or you're
You
not
have to
kidding.
have yes, you have to have a lot of focus on
You better.
what are we going to fill that up with? How are we going to parent together? How are we going to retire together, work together, fulfill our dreams? And most of that has nothing to do with sex.
Boy,
So
it's
if
so
that's the
true.
only like if sex is the only conversation you can have, you're right, after a while it starts to ring hollow. What
So
would you
true.
say what would you say is the most difficult question that you have been asked by one of these students about sex?
Oh, wow. Um, I literally had a student in middle school that asked me if boys can have babies. And then when I explained to him no, he wanted to know why. And, I just
Oh,
had to
wow.
explain. Yeah, that truthfully
That's
was
a
the most,
thorough answer.
yeah, that was the most difficult question I've had. Although the culture is changing now so much that there's a whole lot of new things that are coming to light and being asked. But I would say probably that was the most interesting question, most difficult question, because my question in my mind, as I was explaining to him,
Mhm.
was, where's your parents and why are they not explaining this to you? Why have you not talked about
Right.
this after having a health class, an anatomy class? Like, why aren't you going home and talking to your mom and dad about this? But for whatever reason, he didn't feel like he could. And so he asked
Mhm.
me right in a classroom with 30 other students who busted out laughing, so it was just
Oh, that's so
really,
sad.
yeah, I mean, I felt so bad for this kid. He was probably about 14 and, should have
Mhm.
known, but he didn't. So,
Yeah.
I just answered the question, and tried to explain it to him. And I even, I told him after class, I said, if you want to come back during lunch or something and, want to talk to me about this a little bit more, then we can. So he actually did. He, he got approval from his teacher to leave the lunchroom, and he
Oh
came in my
goodness.
classroom where I was, and we just talked more about it, and
Hmm.
he's like, thank you for explaining this to me because I was embarrassed to ask my mom about it. And I said, well, it's
Hmm.
fine, but it just made me sad because he was embarrassed to ask his mom about it.
Hmm. I love that you're highlighting like that point of the pendulum swing, because I know that I went to a really religious school when I was in elementary school, and there were girls graduating from that school at 18 years old who did not know how you get pregnant. And just as much as it's not okay for women at like that age to think that they have to give sex in a relationship, it's not okay for them to not even know what sex is either. So I'm glad
For
that you
sure.
are taking it from the whole perspective of both sides, whether being way too involved in sex or really not being, I don't want to say not involved enough, but not having the knowledge set that you really do need to move forward into adulthood. You've got to know these things moving into being 14, 15, 18 years old. What is the most
Yeah,
uncomfortable? Sorry, go ahead.
and I am seeing the full spectrum of that, Chelsea, as you said,
Hmm.
the wave of the pendulum, because I've got classes in the Christian schools, like, you know Lakeland Christian School, Victory Academy. I'm going there, but then I'm also going into places like the Juvenile Detention Center in Bartow, where they house students that have committed a crime. I'm going to New Beginnings High School, where they're kicked out of their high school, and then they basically are sent to one of these special high schools to finish out their education. And so
Hmm.
I am seeing it from one side of the coin to the other. And what I've learned is I just have to adjust. Um, just kind of after I spend time with them and we talk, I can kind of feel the pulse of the classroom, of the students, and then we go into it accordingly. I mean, I'm not going to go in and talk about some of the things that I talk with the detention students about at Victory Academy. I'm just not, because
Hmm.
it's not the right format there. So and then also in our churches, when we're doing youth group presentations, some of it is just, it's not really appropriate to talk about in that kind of a setting. So we have
Hmm.
a whole faith-based approach and presentation that we do in the churches, and then we leave a lot of open-ended questions so they can go home and talk to their parents. But again, it's a super good curriculum. It's the same real essentials that we're using in the churches, but it's just the faith-based approach to that.
What is the most uncomfortable question you've been asked about sex? Like when you're like, when did your face get red in these conversations?
Probably the hardest question that I've ever had is, did you wait? And they will, in the
Mm.
almost 16 years that I've been teaching this curriculum, I'm going in there and I'm talking to them about the importance of waiting and not being sexually active. And so then they will just very openly say to me, all of this, is good and you've taught us a lot, but did you wait? And for a lot of years, that was, the red faced, just, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose all of my credibility right here because I did make mistakes, in college, and I wasn't proud of that. But really,
Mhm.
I've learned that the aspect that I can take very honestly is no, I didn't wait. But as a result, it caused issues in my own marriage, and in my relationships even before I got married, because I had formed a pattern, and that's not what I want for you guys. I want better for you.
Mhm.
And so again, I'm very honest about it. I share my story. I don't share it unless they ask me. I don't just offer up the information, but I do share my story if they do ask me, and they like that. They hear me and they hear my heart, and they will say to me, "Well, I understand then why you do this and why you're so passionate about it, because you know what it feels like. You've been there." And so I think there's a lot of
Mhm.
relatability when I'm just honest with them. Whereas at the beginning, when I first started, I was very apprehensive to do that because I thought it was just gonna not blow my cover, but just, just completely, erase my credibility with them. And that's not the case at all.
I agree with that actually, because I do not think that that gives you a lack of credibility. I think that gives you so much more credibility because it's really true. Like you don't know heaven unless you know hell. And if you just walked in there and said, I've done everything right and you guys better copy me because I'm perfect, they would not listen to you at all. They would have no
Absolutely.
interest in what you had to say. So I think it's so much better that you have learned these lessons the hard way because then they look at it and they're like, well, I don't want to learn them the hard way like Aimee had to. So maybe if I listen to her now, then I can like avoid a lot of the pain that Amy's had to deal with. I love that about
Absolutely.
your story. That's
I
perfect.
I don't think you can argue with an experience, and I will tell them that exact phrase in the classroom. This is my experience. You can't argue with me about it because it's my experience. I'm going to tell you honestly what I went through
Hmm.
and what I suffered in my own marriage as a result. And, I want you guys to really hear my heart and really think about what I'm saying because this is truth, and I will say it to them too, which I've had parents that have not been happy about this, but I will say to them, go home and talk to your parents about if they waited. Ask them if they did. And then if they didn't, ask them how it made them feel. Ask them if it's affected their own marriage together to each other.
Hmm.
And I've had many of them come back to me in my high school classes and say, wow, I had no idea that my parents hadn't waited. I didn't know. They never shared that with me. But
Hmm.
because you gave me that assignment to do, I went home and I asked them both. And I will have them interview them individually so they can really get the whole, I mean, whichever parent it is, so they can get their whole story.
Hmm.
And it's been very eye opening, very enlightening for them to do that because then it forces their parents to really get on a real level with their child. Like it's not just, hey, I don't want you guys to have sex because it's, hey, this is my story. And, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I made. And this is why, so it's really, it's a good way to go about it.
Hmm. I love it. So, what can you say to parents who are really, really nervous about this conversation? Maybe they have a past, or maybe they don't really have much of one, and they're like, "Oh, my kid's not even going to believe me if I say that I did wait." Like, what are the do's and don'ts of that conversation, and how can you encourage them to have it, even though they're scared?
Yeah. Again, just follow your heart when you feel like they're ready, and you're going to know. And, part of that is just really having open communication with your kids all the way up throughout their lives. Like, you can't I always say rules without relationship equals rebellion. You can't expect to start talking to your kids at 14, 15, 16 years old and expect
Hmm.
them to just obey all the rules because you're saying that's the way it's got to be. Like you've got to start that when they're young and talking to them about everything and really being invested in their lives. And then
Hmm.
that just carries forward into when they become teenagers and these hard topics. And it's okay if you don't have much of a story. Like to me, that's a great story, because you can say to them, you know I waited, and because I waited, I want you to wait because your dad and I have a great relationship, and this is why. And
Hmm.
so, and if they didn't, same. I mean, you share what you did and how it made you feel, and be honest with them. That's what they want. They want authenticity. They don't want, I my parents that I talk to, because we'll do a parent presentation, which is part of our curriculum, and it's a really
Hmm.
good way to do it. Let me put a plug for this in right now on your show, Chelsey, where we can come
Absolutely.
in. Yeah, we can come in and we do a full parent presentation. We do a PowerPoint. We show them exactly what their kids are up against with social media. We give them all of the statistics on how many students are having sex, the number of teen pregnancies, the number of sexually transmitted diseases, all of that, so that they're very aware. And then we give them tools to to start talking about these topics with their kids. And we want them
Mhm.
to know before we actually go into their school or their church, we want them to know what we're talking about so that they will be really on board with us, and that's a great way to allow us as professionals who've been trained in this topic, who's very comfortable in this topic, to come in
Mhm.
and show them how to do it so that they're successful. Because I talk about this stuff like, my students will say to me, Miss Aimee, you talk about this like you're talking about the weather, but it's just because and I laugh about that, but it's kind of true, but it's because I've been trained and I've done it for so long that it's very comfortable to me. But for a parent
Mhm.
that's never really had the conversation, it's not comfortable. It's awkward and it's weird and it feels, just very uncomfortable, and they avoid it. But the problem
Mhm.
is, in avoiding it, when your hormones kick in as a teenager, you're going to start looking for answers. You're going to start probing. You're going to, you're already inundated with social media as it is, but then it really kicks in about the sexuality and that part of it. And so they're going to go looking for answers. And if it's not been something where they feel like they have an open dialogue with their parent, they're going to go to their friends. They're going to look at social media. They're going to try it. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a nutshell is keep those lines of communication open from the time they're little on up. That's your
Mhm.
child. You're entrusted with them for their entire life, but I mean, really, those formative years are so important. And 18 years will fly by, and then they will leave the nest and they'll go to college, and then everything changes like it has for me. But in those formative years, you need to be the parent. I mean, you had these children, they're yours, they're your responsibility. So you need to put your thoughts and your life, not on hold, but I mean, you need to make sure that you really do have the time for them to really, focus on the things that are important to them. And this is a very important topic, and they will find out one way or another the answers. And so it needs to be from you, if at all possible.
Can you offer any hope to the mom or dad who feels like they've already screwed up, like they waited too long or they said the wrong thing? Is there a way that we can start over, that we can try again with these sexual conversations with our children?
Absolutely. And I don't think it's ever too late. If you feel like you've screwed up, then, you're, it's funny because, there were so many times when I would say probably too much and I felt like I had screwed up. And that's not the way my son saw it at all. I was being really hard on myself. But, I think if you feel like you've screwed up, then you just go back to the beginning and just start talking about these having these conversations, talking about these issues, and being honest. Kids are, I say this all the time, they can sniff out a fake from a mile away. Like if you're a teenager and you're coming in there and you're fake, they know it, and they will just click you right off. Like their brain, I can literally,
Mhm.
I can see it almost, physically happening. They want realness, they want authenticity. And so, again, start over and really just start talking about what you did and the mistakes that you made and that you want better for them, and let them really hear the reasons why. And they're going to come on board. I mean, kids are smart. They're smart. This generation, oh my goodness, they are smarter than they have ever been. It just amazes me. My little 2-year-old granddaughter knows how to go on my phone, and she knows how to go to YouTube. And I mean, and it's like she's 2, like she doesn't even know how to read
Mhm.
yet, but she was born into the age of social media and the internet, so that's all they know. So they are very,
Right.
very smart. They are already doing their own research. They don't know that it's research, so to speak, but they're doing their own research, so to speak. So why not counter that with a really positive message from the one person who loves them the most, and that is you as their parent.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aimee, for sharing today. We really appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Be honest with your kids about sex. Oh, I know. It's so embarrassing and awkward and cringe and yucky. No one wants to talk to their children about sex. But you know what? No kid wants to talk to their mom about sex. And if we expect them to be vulnerable with us, why can't we be vulnerable with them? It's really so important for them to know there's one place they can go for truth, for someone who really cares about them. Even if they've made a mistake, even if we've made a mistake, we can meet each other with truth and say, I know, this is so hard. You must be under so much pressure from other kids, from other people, so much expectation in your life right now about who you're supposed to be. But God decides who you are. And here's the truth about what your body was made for, what your body wasn't made for, what your heart was made for, what your heart wasn't made for. And I want to be there with you to hold your hand as you navigate this difficult minefield of sexuality and human relationships, because I love you and I care about you. And I want to make sure that you know you can always come to me, and I will always be there with truth to help you realize who God has made you to be. Thank you so much for hanging around through the end of the episode. I hope today we have shown you that all life is worth living. Just like in the book of Esther, where God paints a beautiful portrait from the background, God is painting a portrait with your life, and we can learn so much from each other if we simply share our stories. Whenever it feels like the darkness is pressing in, just remember the words of Jesus Christ in John chapter 9. As long as I am in the world, I am the light.